I mean, I want to start off because, by the time this is recorded yesterday, we've heard the sad news of the passing of Justice Ginsburg.
Mhm.
And I wanted, because, I think it's an important time for all of us to be really cognizant of the political theater right now in the US. I mean, that's no exaggeration, but I wanted to
Mhm.
hear your thoughts and what your reactions were of her passing and how that influences your time now at Harvard.
Yeah, so it's definitely such a tragic subject to even talk about. But at the same time, I think that, I kind of have the same perspective as most people in our generation have. We've seen kind of like the landmark achievements, especially in the realm of social justice that have come about with Justice Ginsburg. So I'll actually share what my host family
Mm.
mother shared with me today. I was meeting with her and we were just kind of out by the Charles. And, she was telling me because this lady has lived through Vietnam. She's lived through
Oh,
women's
wow.
protests. She's lived through another round of civil rights uh, movements. So she's really gone, and she's also been very politically active all throughout her life. So she has really seen it all,
Mm,
basically, in terms of social justice. And today she kind of looked at me and she's like, "Salma, I'm so exhausted." Especially with the Black Lives Matter protests kind of going on in the United States right now. She was saying, "We've done all. My generation has done all of this work. We've put in all of this effort, and just to see where we are today, she said, "I'm so exhausted." And I told her, as you should be. I think it's kind of amazing to all of us that we're still dealing with these issues. But anyways, we got to the subject of the passing of Ginsburg, and she said to me that even though she feels very tired, Ginsburg fought, oh my gosh, the cancer battles that she had up until her death. I mean, this lady really was fighting until the very last end. So my host mother kind of said that we should take her as a symbol of moving forward. She said, even though I'm exhausted right now, I mean, really exhausted with the political climate of the United States, I think of inspirational leaders like Ginsburg who probably were just as tired, but kept fighting till the very end. And so, if anything, I think that it's such a privilege that we even got to share a little bit of our lifetime with hers. So, just kind of taking that, I really like the perspective that my host mother had and seeing Ginsburg as a symbol of perseverance, of resilience, and just kind of going forward, trying to push for change in this country.
yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm feeling about that. I don't know. How are you feeling about it, David?
Yeah, I mean, thank you for asking. I suppose, initially I felt guilty a little bit because here we have such a titan of the law, right? Such a I mean, I saw an Instagram post of some of the major landmark achievements of Ginsburg's tenure, Justice Ginsburg's tenure at the court, and she
Mhm,
she helped ensure that, like, women can sign mortgages without
mhm,
a man's approval,
mhm.
right? And a bunch of others that we almost take for granted now, and we kind of have to
Right.
remember that we had to fight for this kind of stuff.
Right.
Every single foot of the women's rights movement was fought, and you know tears, blood, sweat. I That was out of order, but everything was shed for those every single inch. So, and
Definitely.
I suppose it's because to be truthful, I didn't really follow her work very closely or scrutinized her decisions or dissents or any of that very closely. And it's always like the could haves, right? I could have
Mhm.
known about her work earlier and appreciated her more. And now that she's gone, it's I understand that her dissents and her majority opinions in the court are still
Mhm.
there for posterity's sake. But I mean, there's a little bit of that, like, same thing with the passing of Kobe, for instance,
Mm,
right? Where I kind of took for granted his presence. Like, oh
right.
yeah, he's there. He's a great figure in basketball. And then we pass, like, like I could have acknowledged him while he was alive, right? And there's a
Right.
little bit of that missing out factor for me.
Well, I know you feel guilt about that, but I will say I think that's such a I actually would say that being able to take those things for granted is such a beautiful thing about our generation. The
Mhm.
fact that previous generations fought so hard to the point where we don't even have to think like the mortgage thing. You're right. I don't have thankfully I don't have to
Yeah.
thankfully I don't have to worry about that. But I know it's such a privilege and it's a luxury to be able to live like that. And so it's almost kind of amazing that we've gotten to this point. Um, at least, so we have made progress in that sorts, but, I completely understand what you're saying nonetheless with the guilt, and I think one thing is that, life is short as, like, we obviously see, and so, I always think about leaders like that who kind of, like, touch our lives in that kind of manner, and I guess, like, with their passing, if anything, I think it inspires, a point like, it inspires a point of reflection for all of us. We're saying like, "Oh, I should have paid more attention," but just realizing that, having making the conscious effort to realize that, oh, I want to educate myself on this. Maybe this is a point of reflection where we can improve ourselves, we can learn more about it, and we can, like my host brother is saying, just keep moving forward, see them as symbols of resilience.
I love that. I love that. And to draw a quick comparison here, I'm sure you know this as well by now from our conversations, but I'm really into education, right? Like
Yes,
really into.
thankfully, thankfully.
I know, right? Yeah, it's an important deal for America, but there's this figure in the education reform sector, and his name was Sir Ken Robinson.
Mhm.
And he's a great person, hilarious guy. He made a TED talk back in 2006, I believe. That's currently the most viewed TED talk of all time, and it's titled
Wow.
"Do skill do sorry do skills do schools kill creativity?" Right,
Oh,
and he was a huge proponent for arts education, for creativity, and providing these creative outlets for students. And I my philosophy surrounding education has really followed him, and unfortunately he passed away about 4 weeks ago.
oh,
And it struck me, I think, what it should have struck me with Justice Ginsburg's death, where, and this relates to your host mother's message, because for the longest time, same thing with Sir Ken Robinson and the same thing with Justice Ginsburg. When they were alive, they were the trailblazers, right? They
mhm,
were at that frontier constantly, and I have this imagery, right, where like they're holding our hands, right, as they guide us
yes,
along towards meaningful change, right?
right,
And now that they're gone, now that we don't have that hand to hold on to, right, as the guiding force, we have two pathways to choose, right? We either sit down and just cry about it and kind of wallow in the loss, or we can decide to walk on our own, right? And
right,
same thing with Sir Ken Robinson's. You can think like, okay, he dies, does his message die with him? Right? Does his
yeah,
message of
yeah,
every child has talent and creativity and every child deserves that talent to be realized, you know, we have to carry on that message. And I think for Justice Ginsburg's message of women's rights and equality and the Constitution being a living document, I
mhm,
think is crucial as well as we move forward.
right, and I think that's, I mean, honestly, I think that's why they became trailblazers because they made sure that their voice was heard.
Facts.
And I think, I mean, honestly, as we can see in the United States, their voices have been heard. I mean, it's touched you, it's touched me, and I
Mhm.
think that definitely just by having their voice heard, I think that alone has inspired future movements and just future efforts to continue what they've started for us. Because you're right, they were holding our hands, and now it's time for us to not only go forward, but to hold someone else's hand too, you know? I
Mhm.
always think of it as a generational thing and where they led us and then as we hopefully lead the way as well. I mean, we're going to be leading we have an entire generation trailing us. So
Yeah.
I think it's like an kind of an interesting thing. It's never ending in that way. So we have to make sure that we make use of that time. Yeah.